Welcome back to Saturday Agenda. With me, Helen McCabe, Josh Gordon and Alison Wren. Alison, I want to ask you about the COAG meeting. The Prime Minister gave the apology last year. Has he met, well, the apology to the stolen generations? Do you think the rhetoric's been matched by the action from what you've seen?
Well, the thing with this Productivity Commission report that was released yesterday about Indigenous disadvantage, the thing is that it only talks about outcomes up to 2007. So it just gave the Prime Minister such a good way of blaming the horrific outcomes given by this report, blaming the former government for these outcomes, which were quite horrific.
Yeah, okay. Josh, what are your thoughts on what the outcome of the...
I think Alison's made a good point here. That a lot of the reporting of this was sort of linked to the fact that, we're spending billions and billions of dollars of taxpayers' money on this problem, but what progress have we made? But if you actually sort of dig into the statistics, a lot of them are sort of 2007, 2006 figures. So there's a bit of a problem making that link because that was some time ago. I think that the key point here is that this problem is going to take some time to solve. It's a very, very difficult problem. It's going to keep jumping up again for years and years. And
as it has done.
As it has done for decades, So there's no quick fix. You're not going to get a better report out, particularly necessarily in a year. Things may even get worse before they get better. And, another issue is, reporting of child abuse. That was one of the big issues in the report, that it's gone up. But a lot of that may have to do with just the simple fact that there's more people on the ground, and so these sorts of issues are being reported more. Okay. And so there's a bit of statistical sort of noise in here as well, I think.
I definitely wonder about that, the number of people that are actually coming out now. As Jenny Macklin said, the Indigenous Minister, she said it's getting all these issues out of the shadows. And I just wonder how much. I mean, it's 7 times more likely in Indigenous communities to have reported cases of abuse and neglect than in non-Indigenous communities. And I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that people are coming out a little bit more, but certainly they are not good statistics. Yeah. And Kevin Rudd, when he did give his COAG press conference yesterday, he was devastated by it.
Let's hear what he had to say, the Prime Minister, after receiving that report from the Productivity Commission on overcoming Indigenous disadvantage.
It is time that we put the rancour of the past behind us. It is time that we recognise the things that have not worked in the past. It is time we actually march together towards the future.
Helen, we know that the problems, as these guys have been saying, they've been around for so long. Standards for food quality were agreed upon and a few other things. What did you make of the outcomes? Were they substantial enough? I know that it's going to take a long time to deal with these issues, but what did you make of the outcomes? It didn't seem to be, mind-boggling in terms of the scope of it.
It's just exhausting, this debate. I was an Aboriginal Affairs reporter in the 90s in the Canberra Press Gallery, and I looked at those front pages, particularly the Australian this morning, and just sort of looked at it with absolute frustration that here we go again, another Productivity Commission report. The statistics are absolutely horrific. The Prime Minister's right to be devastated because the chances of anyone fixing this, you feel like the chances of any government fixing this are so slim. We try all sorts of policy prescriptions. They're all well-intentioned, whether it's the integration, the intervention program, or whatever Jenny Macklin's now looking at. It's terribly difficult to get real outcomes. The stuff on food that you're talking about making it compulsory for little food outlets in remote communities to sell fresh fruit and vegetables. That sounds terribly logical. I have been hearing that since I was doing Aboriginal Affairs reporting. So, I'm amazed that it's still not happening, but I know why it's not happening, and that's because it's very hard to get fresh fruit and vegetables in an affordable way into these communities, into these community centres that are run in these areas. So they're the obstacles, and that's just a very small element of the problem. To blame the Howard government for not achieving anything, big call. They did pump a lot of money into it and a lot of resources and energy. Certainly Mal Brough went to great lengths, and the debates were bruising. Now, bruising internally in the Aboriginal community, those debates are still separating the Aboriginal leaders. So to get outcomes here is just tough. But nevertheless, someone has to keep trying. And Jenny Macklin, I think, needs to be commended for the efforts that she's now committing to trying to solve some of these problems.
Okay, just one final issue I want to touch on. President Obama responded yesterday to the latest jobless figures out of the United States, up to 9.5% in June, 467,000 people newly unemployed in the United States. Let's hear what President Obama had to say about the need to focus on a low carbon economy and clean energy into the future in terms of creating jobs for the future.
We know we're going to have to change how we use energy. We know we're going to have to change how we operate our healthcare systems. We know that we're going to have to change how we train our young people to compete in this new global economy. And so to make the argument that somehow we should just lock in on the status quo or perpetuate the same policies that got us into this mess in the first place and that somehow is going to solve our problems just doesn't make any sense.
Josh, it was interesting that President Obama, he had been meeting with energy company CEOs, the focus off the back of those jobs figures to talk about the future, the clean energy focus that obviously is his legislative focus at the moment too.
It certainly is. I mean, on Friday a week ago in the US, they passed something called the US Clean Energy Act, which was a fairly historic bill to reduce emissions quite significantly on 2005 levels and 1990 levels. And I think by 2050 they're talking about an 83% reduction in carbon dioxide emissions. It's gone through the US lower house. It still has to negotiate its way through the Senate in the US, which is obviously a big hurdle in the same way it is in Australia. But it is a historic passing of this bill, I think. And, I think in some ways it does place more pressure on the opposition in Australia because, the US is moving ahead here, the European Union's moving ahead, all sorts of countries are moving ahead, but they're still sort of dithering on this issue and they're so divided politically on it that I think, it's a very, very vexing, difficult problem for Malcolm Turnbull.
Alison, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it was quite funny. Only an hour ago, we got an email from Senator Steve Fielding, Family First Senator, who has put out another media release saying that there's new research, there's a new report, 48-page report, independent groups put out this one, saying that there are more questions about the government science. And it just looks like he's moving further and further away from ever siding with Climate Change Minister Penny Wong on this issue. And given that the Coalition, do we honestly know where they're going to vote on this issue in August? And if Steve Fielding isn't going to vote with the government, well, does Malcolm Turnbull want to bring up the prospect of a double dissolution election? Probably not at this point in time on the back of these polls this week, but certainly he is under increased pressure.
Absolutely. Helen, what are your thoughts just finally on this? He doesn't want an early election, as Alison quite rightly pointed out. Would it be better to cop the bloody nose of a split party, people crossing the floor and so on, just to avoid that?
Well, I think the Obama comments are very interesting in terms of the job loss issue and the natural tension between job losses and implementing this policy. And that is really where the debate is centred, and particularly for the sceptics in the Liberal Party. I think it'll depend a lot on how the job issue plays out in this country as to how the climate change debate is accepted. But at the moment, as we sit here, I believe Malcolm Turnbull is desperate. I think his natural instinct is to support a form of emissions trading scheme. Well, he's made that clear in the past. He's made it clear more recently that he wants to get something through next year in order to get it off the books. He's already put that in the public domain. I don't think he's got any choice if he's to be seen as a leader to go through with that. All
right. Helen McCabe, thank you for your time today on Saturday Agenda. Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And Josh, Alison, good to see you both. Thank you very much for joining us. That's all for this edition of the program. Helen Daly will be along at the new time of 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow morning with Sunday Agenda, so make sure you join her. She'll be talking to the Deputy Liberal Leader, Julie Bishop. For now, I'm Kieran Gilbert. Thanks for your company.